This might be the best meal I've had all week.
It really is. I'm so glad we found this place.
Morning in the mountains begins slowly, just like every other day. A thin layer of mist still rests on the wooden roof, and small drops of water cling to the leaves in the garden. The fresh air makes breathing feel easier compared to the life they once had. Jack steps outside, carrying a bucket of water. He bends down and carefully waters each row of vegetables. His movements are now more natural, no longer as clumsy as when they first arrived in the mountains. Inside the house, Tien is lighting the stove. A small flame flickers, casting a warm glow across the room. She prepares a simple breakfast, just vegetables and a little leftover food from the day before. They don't speak much, but the silence between them is not uncomfortable. It is peaceful, something they had to lose everything to gain. They are not rich, but they have enough. And sometimes, enough is the most valuable thing in the world. After breakfast, Jack is tidying up the garden when the old phone in his pocket suddenly vibrates. The unfamiliar sound breaks the quiet of the mountain air, causing him to pause. He takes out the phone and looks at the screen. An international number. Jack frowns. Since leaving his old life behind, he has barely kept in touch with anyone from the outside world. Calls like this no longer happen. He hesitates for a few seconds. Many thoughts cross his mind. Could it be someone from his past? Or something he had tried so hard to leave behind? The phone keeps ringing. Finally, he answers. Hello? A deep, clear, and unfamiliar voice comes from the other side. I am a lawyer. Just a simple sentence, but enough to make Jack freeze in place. Jack stands still, holding the phone tightly in his hand. The voice on the other end continues, slower and clearer this time. I'm calling to inform you. Your father has passed away. For a moment, all the sounds around him seem to disappear. The wind stops. Even the birds go silent. Jack doesn't say a word. He just stands there as if time itself has frozen. Father. A word he has tried to forget for so long. The man who left him when he was just a child. The man he believed would never be part of his life again. And yet now, the news of his death arrives so suddenly. Jack doesn't know what he should feel. Sadness, anger, or just emptiness? He tightens his grip on the phone. For the first time in many years, his past has returned. Jack van Jungim, tai ap vao jian thoain hung tam tri duong nhu janjiratsha. Sau vai gyai im lang, gyong luat su lai vang lane, lan nai mang theo mot thong tin kien moi thu tro nen ku hiu hon. Jack remains still, the phone pressed against his ear, but his mind feels far away. After a brief silence, the lawyer's voice continues, carrying information that makes everything even more confusing. In the will, he left all his assets to you, approximately $5 million. Jack blinks, unsure if he heard correctly. $5 million. A number he once chased, once considered a goal. But now, standing in the quiet mountains, it feels distant and unfamiliar. He does not feel happy. He does not feel relieved. Only an emptiness grows inside him. The father who abandoned him is now the one who left him everything. The contradiction is impossible to understand. Jack looks down at his hands now used to farming, digging, and watering. $5 million. Does it really belong to this life anymore? After ending the call, Jack doesn't go back inside immediately. He stands in the yard, looking into the distance where layers of mountains fade into the mist. Old memories begin to return. Memories of his childhood, waiting for a father who never came. Moments when he wondered why he had been left behind. There were no explanations, no return, only silence that lasted for years. Jack clenches his fists. It took him a long time to accept that he didn't need that father anymore. He built his life on his own. He stood up after every hardship. And now, a message from the past has come back, bringing everything he tried to forget. He doesn't know how to face it. Jack takes a deep breath and walks back inside the house. Lytutien is sitting by the stove preparing lunch. She looks up and immediately notices something different in his eyes. "Is something wrong?" she asks. Jack hesitates for a moment. The thought of telling her everything crosses his mind, but then he shakes his head. It's nothing. A simple answer, but not the truth. She watches him for a few more seconds, as if wanting to ask more. But then she stays silent. She trusts him, and that makes Jack feel even heavier inside. He sits down, trying to act normal. But his thoughts are in chaos. A secret has just been created, and he is not sure how long he can keep it. That evening, they sit down to eat as usual. The meal is still simple: vegetables, soup, and a small portion of food. But the atmosphere has changed. Jack eats more slowly than usual. His eyes often drift into the distance, as if he is thinking about something far away. Lytutien watches him quietly. She doesn't ask, but she can clearly feel the difference. The silence tonight is no longer peaceful. It feels heavy. Jack tries to say a few small things, but his voice lacks natural warmth. The conversation ends quickly. They fall back into silence again. An invisible distance begins to form between them. Not large, but enough to be felt. Night falls, and everything becomes quiet. Jack lies on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Moonlight passes through the window, casting faint shadows on the wall. He cannot sleep. In his mind, the number, $5 million, keeps repeating. It is an amount that could completely change their lives. They could leave this place. They could return to a more comfortable life, but is that really what they need? Jack turns his head and looks at Lytutien. She is sleeping peacefully. Her face is calm, free from worry. Suddenly, he feels afraid. Afraid that money will destroy everything they have built. Afraid that this peace will disappear. And for the first time, Jack is not sure if he wants to become rich again. Jack cannot remain lying still. He quietly sits up, careful not to wake Lytutien. The small room is filled with cold moonlight, and the silence is so deep that he can hear his own heartbeat. He steps outside onto the porch. The mountain night air is colder, but it helps clear his mind. Jack looks at the familiar yard below, the place where he spends his days watering plants, working, and living a simple life. He begins to wonder, if he had the money, would all of this still remain? Would they leave this place? Would the peaceful mornings disappear? Or worse, would he change? Jack clenches his fists. He is not afraid of being poor. He has grown used to hardship. But he is afraid of losing this sense of peace. Afraid of losing Lytutien, the one who stayed by his side when he had nothing. In the darkness, Jack realizes for the first time, the most valuable thing is not money. It is the life they have built together. Jack stands outside for a long time before returning to the room. He looks at Lytutien, who is still sleeping peacefully. Her face is calm, untouched by worry. He walks closer and sits down beside the bed. A clear thought forms in his mind. He is not ready to tell her the truth. At least, not yet. Jack knows that once the words are spoken, everything will change. This simple life may no longer remain the same. He does not want to risk losing it too soon. He gently reaches out and holds her hand. She moves slightly in her sleep, as if sensing his presence. Jack lets out a quiet sigh. a secret has begun to take shape, not because he wants to hide it, but because he does not yet know how to face it. That night, he closes his eyes. But deep inside, a storm is slowly forming, waiting for the moment it will break.